Big things are happening in the 911 Turbo market. The complete market saw prices surge during last year, but this changed now. Price trends for the newer models are flat or down, whereas price trends for the older models accelerated upwards. In other words, money is flowing into the modern classic segment. Let's have a look at the most recent developments in the turbo market and check out which segments are up and which ones are down. But before we do all of that, let's have a quick look at today's US market. Over here we have the clean title cars that are listed for sale, split by generation. Total supply sits at 749 cars and the median price is $174,000. But this does not tell us so much. Prices already start in the low 50s for an old 996 with high mileage, while high-spec 992s can go for $350,000. Now what's interesting in this graph is the way in which prices are distributed for each generation. Sure, there are some outliers like the exclusive models in the 991 market, but most cars are priced around the median. And this contrasts to what we can see in the 996 and 997 market. Over there we can see that there are numerous cars which are priced far away from the median for a particular model year. The tails in the price distributions are much longer. And this is to a large extent caused by the manuals, the cars with a low mileage and the cars that are in an excellent condition. These are really demanding extreme premiums and the premiums have been increasing. But we will talk more about that soon. It is namely time to have a look at the price developments over time. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, there are big differences within the 911 Turbo market and this has not always been the case. After the pandemic we saw prices increase in the complete market. More recently though, price trends are flattening or even decreasing. But this pattern does not apply to the complete turbo market. The 996 and 997 market looks strong, but it are especially the low mileage cars in prime condition that are separating themselves from the rest of the market. Let's have a look and we start with the 996. We can see that prices were flat during the last 3 months, but that they were soaring till June of this year. Compared to June 2020, prices are up by 54%, and with this increase they rank among the largest increases that I've seen on the channel. Another important difference to the rest of the market is the timing of the flattening in the curve. It only occurred during the last 3 months, whereas most markets already started to top at the beginning of this year. So there is something special about this market, and we can uncover that when we look a bit deeper into this price change. Over here we have the price change broken down by mileage, and this means that the red line, for example, shows the price development for the high mileage cars. So the cars between roughly 59,000 and 147,000 miles. Now when you look at this chart, you can see that the blue and orange line are drifting away from the green and the red line since the beginning of this year. So this means that the low mileage cars increased more than the high mileage cars, and this is a typical development for these older car markets. You frequently see that premiums for low mileage cars that are in prime condition shoot up when cars get older, or in other words, when they are turning into collectibles. For the 996 and 997 it has been discussed endlessly in numerous articles and online communities, but it really starts to show now. Naturally though, these price trends fluctuate a bit more because the number of cars in each mileage bucket is lower compared to the number of cars that make up the aggregate price trend. But we can see this development now for several months, so it's likely that this is a real development and not pure chance. If we look at the cars with a higher mileage, we can see that those segments are still strong. Combined, they did not change significantly. So is it then all good news for the 996? Well, no. There is one early warning indicator that popped up in September. We can see that supply increased from 40 to 58 cars, and this is not per definition a problem, but it is the only increase in the entire period. Moreover, when you look into this, you will see that this increase is mainly driven by the cars in the low mileage buckets. So more low mileage cars were put up for sale for higher prices. The question is of course if there is sufficient demand for these cars. Typically these are bought by collectors. If you're looking to drive the car a lot, then you're most likely better off by looking for a well looked after example with a slightly higher mileage. But now then, does the same apply to the 997 market? Well, the short answer is yes. And if you enjoy that short answer so you don't need to look through all the graphs, please support the channel by clicking on the like button down below. Thank you. Over here we have the 997 market split by the 997.1 and 997.2 generations and by the base and the S models. If we start at the bottom with the .1, we can see that prices increased by 3.3% compared to 3 months ago. .2 base models are up by 0.6% and .2 S models came down by 5.9%. But we need to interpret these last two price changes with caution. Market supply is low in these segments and this means that price trends tend to fluctuate more. That's also the reason why I did not break these down further by transmission type. If we take then a wider perspective and look at the long-term trends, we can see that the market is still strong. Prices are at the same level as last year or even above that. Yet, there is one thing we need to take note of. We can see that the shaded area surrounding the price trends widened, and this tells us that the price uncertainty or the price variation increased. If we look again at the price trend broken down by mileage bucket, we can see exactly what happened. The story is the same as in the 996 market. We can clearly see that the two buckets with the lowest mileage cars set themselves apart from the rest of the market. Again, since the beginning of this year, we can see a continuation of the upward price trends, and this contrasts to the other two segments where prices remained flat. So this means that, just as in the 996 market, the premium for low mileage cars that are in prime condition increased. The rest of the market is still fairly strong as prices held up nicely, but most of the upward momentum disappeared. So we saw now that the 996 and 997 markets are still quite strong. Prices are flat in most segments with exception of the low mileage cars. Those increased much more than the rest of the market and are really becoming collector's items. And this becomes even more evident when we look at the 991 and the 992 markets. Over here we have the 991 market excluding the exclusive editions. We can see immediately that this graph differs from all the previous ones. Prices topped in the beginning of this year and have been flat or decreasing ever since. The decrease even seems to accelerate in the most recent months. .1 base models came down by 1.7%, S models by 3.3%, .2 base models by 5.6% and S models by 3.1%. Looking at the supply trend, we might find an explanation for this. We can see that supply is at or close to pre-pandemic levels. It dropped drastically between the beginning of 2020 and the beginning of 2021, but has been increasing for the last 1.5 years. So this means that supply is approximately at the same level as before, but that prices are much higher. Hence, the question is whether or not there is sufficient demand at these prices for all that supply. The price drop could be more than just a winter dip. So what about the 992 market then? Following all sorts of problems in the world of which I'm sure you are aware, waiting times are long and prices are high. And as a result of this, it's not uncommon to pay over MSRP for one. We could see this back in the price trends, but the worst appears to be over now. Over here we have the price trends for the used base and S models, and you can see that prices came down a lot during the last 3 months. Base models are down by 4.3% and S models by 5.4%, and these price drops are carried across the market. Cars from all model years and mileage buckets came down in price. Or in other words, these cars took the first depreciation hit. Availability also improved slightly, especially in the S market. In March of last year it was close to impossible to find a used turbo for sale. Now, however, there is a bit of choice. Supply increased a lot and there are now 176 turbo S's listed for sale and 30 base models. And this of course helps to push prices down. And with that it's also time to wrap up and conclude. Low mileage 996 and 997 turbos that are in excellent condition are drifting away from the rest of the market. Prices have been increasing significantly more and there are almost no signs of any weakness. It's clear that these cars are collector's items now. Prices for other 996 and 997 turbos are also strong when you compare them to the rest of the market, but the upward momentum faded away slightly. 991 and 992 price trends are a lot weaker compared to the older cars. In the 991 market we could even see a small acceleration in the downward momentum. 992s on the other hand saw their first price decrease, hereby highlighting that the phase in which price premiums over MSRP are increasing is over. And with that we arrived at the end of this video. Now if you enjoy this data-driven way of analyzing car markets but would like to see the analysis for a different car, let me know the name of the car for which you would like to see an analysis by commenting it down below in the comment section. Once there are enough requests for a certain car, I will make a video about it. The content has been a little bit Porsche heavy lately, but I promise that will change soon. Don't forget then to subscribe and to click on the notification bell so you get notified when your requested analysis goes live. As always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you next week for a new video.